We all bring different gifts and expertise to a very small state agency tasked with a significant amount of work. Ombudsmen are critical for residents in long-term care settings. Their voices are too often not present when decisions impacting them are being made. I have listened to long-term care residents. I have been their voice and stood by them to support theirs since I was 5 years old, volunteering in nursing homes with my grandmother. I would be honored to serve them further and in the process to serve all Kansans as a state ombudsman. I thank you today. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Camille, thank you for showing up on this nice warm day.
Thank you, sir.
You know, we had a conversation earlier, I think ranking minority member on our planning committee. She had asked me how long it took me to get up here from southeast Kansas. I'm in Baxter Springs, and it took me about 4.5 hours, where normally it's 3 hours and 15 minutes. You had a similar trek and a similar path. I assume you came up 75.
I did.
That was the same path I took.
Yes, sir.
So hopefully on your way back home, the roads are a little bit clearer. So committee members, do we have any questions for Camille? Wow, Camille, you did a fantastic job on explaining. And all right, Senator O'Shea.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm the one that emailed you and said, yeah, the aging services is some background. So I know ombudsmen do a great job of representing the individual, and I also know that nursing homes deal with a lot of regulations, and it's been my experience that they're just trying so hard to meet all the regulations and expectations. So how do you intend to balance that, knowing that they're doing their best and a little bit in over their head with all that's required of them?
I said before, I said it's extremely complex business. It is. It's a hard business. And what we find when we go into nursing homes is that we do find that for the most part, the people that are working in there are really struggling and doing their best to do a good job. The residents indeed also are struggling, and they want to support the people that are caring for them as well. We hear that overwhelmingly too. And so what I would intend to do is to really work together, like I said before, with the industry itself and say, look, these are the regulations of your business. And so instead of we can't do something, let's figure out how we can do it for everybody's best interest. Okay?
Committee, do we have any other questions? Senator Baumgartner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you so much for being here today. So I know that from a legislative standpoint, we've had tremendous frustration with what seems to be the lack of early effort with KDADs in helping our long-term care facilities in their training and being ready. So when essentially the state was shut down in March, there had not been training within the long-term care facilities. And when we had a hearing in the summer, we were told that, well, they didn't have to because CDC didn't require that until July. So did you receive calls about that, or how might there be a better partnership with KDADs providing assistance in concert with Kansas Department of Health and our long-term care facilities?
It's actually a goal I have to see us work more together instead of less. I think we can have better communication, but at the same time, I don't think any of us were prepared for this pandemic. I don't think any of us knew what all the changes that were going to have to occur. And I applaud the people that work in the homes, the people that live in the homes, the people that regulate the homes, you all as you're trying to, figure out the next best things for everything that they've done in that regard. I will say that infection control has been something that should be in place all along, and those kind of protocols. And so we've seen homes do a really good job of that, and we've seen a few that have not. And that's just the truth of the matter. They probably could use some assistance and guidance more in those cases.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Gossage.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for being here. How do you see the difference between a long-term care facility and an independent living facility?
Well, the long-term care ombudsman do not have any kind of work in the independent living facilities. So they are not, and they're not regulated the same. They're simply not licensed and regulated the same. And I wouldn't know all the details of the independent living to know, what they do have, but independent living is kind of what it says, right? So they don't have the same kind of oversight or the same kind of regulations that assisted livings, other type of adult care homes have.
And how do you see your role changing from being a regional ombudsman to the state ombudsman? Will you still be hands-on, or would you be more involved in meetings with your ombudsman?
Well, regional ombudsmen are able to take care. We hire people that could take care of their regions. And so they absolutely will have their regions that they take care of. I will support them in that role. Obviously, I hope to get to talk to all of you more in this role than I did as a regional role. So I think that they will do their jobs. I expect fully they will do their jobs. They will come if they need assistance, and we will support them in that role.
Thank you.
Okay.
Senator O'Shea, and then Senator Petty.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Tell me if I'm overstepping in this question, but I'm curious if you'd like to get ready. No. Are you able to share your opinion about long-term care facilities being taken out of the liability protections?
I think that our office does not support that bill. That's what I would say today.
Thank you.
Senator Petty.
Thank you. And thank you so much for being here and for the work that you've done in the past and are looking forward to doing in the future. I was wondering if you might comment on the fact you earlier said that in our nursing homes that you see that they're putting forth a great effort, and so are the people that they employ, as well as the residents that live there, and the residents support the staff. I mean often if you have anyone that lives in a nursing home, they'll talk about their primary care person that they come in contact with every day because they become very close to them. So my question is around, do you feel that that possibly, I mean, we often hear about the negatives of what COVID-19 has brought forward within the industry, but do you see that there are some positives for what the pandemic has brought forward? You mentioned earlier about care and about, I'm just wondering about that from the training perspective or care perspective. Do you see that now there's maybe a greater emphasis on some areas than there might have been before?
Well, I hope going forward there will be. I just hope there will be. The folks that are doing a good job are doing an excellent job. And the folks that are not, we need to help do better for our neighbors. Okay? There are some out there that are not, and they're lost. We have a spectrum. We have folks out there that are doing a great job, and they have good support of their leadership and their organizations. And we have some in the middle that really could just use some additional guidance. I think Senator Baumgartner, brought that up, and I think that would be helpful to them. And then we have some folks out there that need additional, more support than that, and maybe need to look at their business a little bit differently. That's just the truth, and that's out there in about any business that you look at, but this one cares for people. And so we need to help get it all on track for our fellow Kansans. We hear every day frustrations, more so during this pandemic, from the people who work in the homes, in addition to the people that live in the homes, with them not getting the support they need. And I don't mean that in all facilities, I mean that in some facilities, okay? So we need to make sure that good decisions are being made for our Kansas citizens, and that people understand they're making decisions following the regulations that they've agreed to for the business that they're in, and following our state laws. And if they do that, I think everything will be good. If people are treated with dignity and respect at all levels, we're happier.
I just have a follow-up. When you talk about not getting support, are you talking about the workers not getting support or the residents not getting support?
Yeah, there are cases where, you know, I'm sure, I hope like I'll get a chance to talk about this more in the future with you. But I think it's really important that we recognize that we have a lot of entities that are no longer owned by Kansas businesses. And they are making decisions and policy across the country that really conflicts with, quite frankly, the regulations and law. And they are people that are working, our Kansas who live here, our workforce is trying very hard to take care of their neighbors. And sometimes they are afraid for their jobs if they don't do it the way that their bosses tell them to do it, right? When their bosses are making those decisions, they don't live here in Kansas, okay?
Camille, one more question, Senator Thompson, and this will be our last question because we do have a heavy agenda.
Gotcha.
Thank you.
Just real basic, what's your experience in long-term care facilities? Have you spent a lot of time in them? I'm just kind of, if you could speak to that, so.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I mean, I mentioned that I started out by volunteering when I was at a young age of 5 years old with my grandmother. And for the past 5 years, I have been a long-term care ombudsman who goes into homes on a regular basis. And so my observation and what I say to you really is what the residents have said to me and what my eyes have seen, sir. Thank you.
Camille, thank you for your travels up here, and thank you for presenting in front of us. Committee, we will entertain a motion at this time. We have 3 options whenever we have a confirmation hearing. The first option is to recommend to the full Senate. Second is no recommendation, and the third is to not recommend. So at this time, we will open the floor for any motions. Senator Petty.
I'll make a motion that we recommend to the full Senate. Positive recommendation.
I have a motion on the floor by Senator Petty to recommend Camille to the State Long-Term Care Ombudsman. Do we have a second? I have a second by O'Shea. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, same sign. That motion was carried. Thank you, committee members. Camille, thank you. Now we will open our hearing on Senate Bill 120, establishing the Joint Committee on Child Welfare System Oversight. And first up to explain the bill, we'll have Jenna Moyer. Jenna, welcome to the committee and thank you.
I know, just had to unmute myself. Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. And I'm trying to pull it up. There we go. Okay. Senate Bill 120 would establish the Joint Committee on Child Welfare System Oversight. And this bill creates a new section of law. And in that new section of law, this joint committee would be established. Subsection A lists the tasks that the committee has to review, and I'll briefly just go over them, and we can get more into details if you would like. But the first one deals with the level of oversight that the Department for Children and Families has over its contracting entities. The second is the duties and contributions of state agencies and service providers that provide child welfare services in the state. The third is level of access to those services, including mental health and community-based services. The fourth is the number of children in the child welfare system. The fifth is licensing standards for case managers. And the sixth is any other topic that the committee deems necessary or appropriate. Subsection B goes into the 11 members of the committee, which would have 3 from the House Children and Seniors Committee, 2 by the Speaker, 1 appointed by the Minority Leader, 3 members of this committee, Senate Public Health and Welfare, 2 appointed by the Senate President, 1 by the Minority Leader, and then 2 other members of the House appointed by the Speaker, and then 1 member of the House appointed by the Minority Leader, and 1 member of the Senate appointed by the Senate President. And subsection C, which begins on page 2, line 7, lays out the terms that the members may serve. Subsection D provides for what chamber the committee chairperson will be from based upon the year, which is pretty standard language in any joint committee similar to this. And finally, subsection E requires that the committee have their first meeting by August 1st, 2021, and then at least twice more per year. And subsection F requires that the committee submit a report to the legislature every year that would recommend changes to laws, rules, and regulations. And then the H, I, and J are all just pretty standard joint committee provisions, which I'll be happy to speak more about if you have any questions about those.
No, thank you. Committee, do we have any questions over the bill? Seeing none, we will move to proponent. Oops, sorry. Senator Stephan.
Thank you. Can I have a little bit of background on what has led to the need for the state of Kansas to have another group like this together at additional expense?
Jenna, I think I'll answer that if that's okay.
Yep, I was just going to defer. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Senator Stephan, that's a very good question. Unfortunately, there is very little oversight. The only oversight that the legislature has currently on KDHE or KDADS or DCF is while we are in session. That's for 90 days. Having this extra joint committee will give a little bit more oversight and accountability. We just recently came off of a class action lawsuit that our foster care system has been in turmoil. We just recently learned through the media, not as legislators being told or informed, that we have a issue with one of our providers, serious issues, fraud, workers taking advantage of youth. This is something the legislature should have oversight on and should be knowledgeable on it to make better decisions. And when we're in session for 90 days, it's just nearly impossible for legislators to have that opportunity to react. Any further questions? Seeing none, we will now move to our proponents. First up, we have Laura Howard. She's the Secretary for Department of Child Welfare System, for Children and Families. Laura, Madam Secretary, welcome.
Good morning, Senator. Thank you. And thank you to members of the committee for the opportunity to speak just for a few minutes here in support of this legislation, creating a committee on child welfare oversight. You know, when I came back to state government after being gone for a few years, you know, one of the things that was most valuable to me stepping into this role as secretary was the work that had been done over several years by the foster care task force. That really gave me lots of insights into the issues going on within the system and really became a bit of a roadmap for many of the practice improvements that we've undertaken as a state. So, so I welcome this. I had the chance to participate this summer with the Special Committee on Foster Care Oversight. I felt like that was very, very valuable. And again, we're already implementing many of those practice improvements. I strongly believe in the role of the oversight of the legislature. I think that just in the same way that the Bethel Oversight Committee plays an important role with regard to Medicaid, I think there's probably no area in, as it relates to state government, that's more critical than child welfare when we think about youth being in the custody, in my custody, but you know, in the custody of the state. So again, valuable oversight, and I would welcome the opportunity to work with the Child Welfare Oversight Committee should the legislature support this moving forward. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. And committee members, do we have any questions for the Secretary? Senator Petty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, for Secretary, for being here. In the bill, of the duties and responsibilities, there was one area that it said that there would be and it was number 6, any other topic the joint committee deems necessary or appropriate. Do you see other areas that would be, might be considered here? When it gets so broad, I'm always a little concerned about that, so I'd like your input.
Madam Secretary, you're muted.
Oh, I apologize. I would also echo Senator Petty, a comment that the chairman made a few minutes ago. We did just enter into and have finalized by a judge, a settlement for a class action lawsuit. As a part of that settlement, we'll be monitored and measured on a number of areas within the system, placement stability, mental health services, access for youth, things like that. So when I think of, other topics the committee deems appropriate, it would seem to me very appropriate that the committee would review those reports, review the entities we're working with in terms of the ongoing measurement of our progress under that class action litigation. That's the first thing that comes to my mind, Senator.
Thank you.
Do we have any more questions for the Secretary? Seeing none, we will, Madam Secretary, thank you for your time and for your testimony.
Thank you.
Committee, we will now draw your attention. We do have written only for Leah Filter, Director of Government Relations for KASB, Rachel Marsh, CEO of Children's Alliance of Kansas. Is there anybody else wishing to testify as a proponent? Seeing, Senator Baumgartner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I don't see this so much as testimony, but I think one of the things that hasn't come up is when we have had oversight meetings before, they have been interims, and there is not necessarily a consistency of the membership of those interim committees. So it is very difficult to follow and track what is and isn't being shared consistently from year to year. One of the benefits of this oversight committee is, one, the frequency of meeting, but two, that very distinct assignment of who will be the members of that committee, so that there will be more continuity with regard to membership, but also being able to track that flow of communication. One of the big surprises that occurred in the interim this summer and fall was hearing about the settlement agreements and what had been achieved ever since the courts had said they were considering the settlement, and that was the number of kids that were staying either in an office, a hotel room, or a vehicle overnight per month. And that was absolutely very different from testimony that we had heard in the Public Health Committee at the start of the legislative session. So for those that weren't on the Health Committee, they didn't even know that that had been addressed several months earlier, and that the information shared in the Health Committee was significantly different from what was being shared with regard to that settlement. So that continuity would be crucial. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Baumgartner. Senator Stephan.
Thank you. What would this bill do as far as giving this committee any opportunity to move the needle on these problems?
It will give the committee the opportunity to. Now, whether the committee makeup does or doesn't, that would be up entirely to that committee.
And I might, if I may, Mr. Chair, I might add that this joint committee would also have the authorization to submit legislation.
Do we have any further comments on this? Okay, not seeing any. We do not have any opponents. Is there anybody here that would like to testify as an opponent? Okay. We have no neutral Is there anybody here wanting to testify as a neutral? Okay, not seeing any. We will close the hearing on Senate Bill 120. And committee members, I will plan on working this bill probably, if we have time allotted, tomorrow or Thursday. So if you have anything that you would like to amend, please get with the reviser and let them know. Moving to our next item on, Senator Petty.
I'm sorry, and I should see this. Could you or Jenna remind me where in the bill it says how often this committee will meet in the interim, or does it say, or would that be approved by the LCC?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Thank you. I believe it meets.
I think I just found it between line
here.
30 and 37 on the second page. Is that?
Yeah, so it would require at least once for 2 consecutive days during each third and fourth calendar quarters. And then twice during the session. And it's not to exceed 6 meetings. And so that would be subject to approval by the LCC. In addition, so essentially what would be in here would be the 2 meetings. And then after that, the LCC could approve additional days.
So it would be like the CanCare oversight in that it would have meetings during the session as well as outside of the session.
If it were passed in its current form, it would have 2 meetings during these. I mean, the April meeting, I guess, could be during your April break, but 1 in January, 1 in April, and then at least once for 2 consecutive days. So, you know, twice in October, twice in November, whenever during the interim.
Thank you.
Committee members, with no further discussion, we will now move to our next item of business. The Kansas Guardianship Budget Program. Did everybody have a chance to soak that in, review it, come up with recommendations? And just as a refresher, Senator Erickson will be the one reporting to the Ways and Means Committee on our findings. So, what is the will of the committee? Senator Petty?
I'll make a recommendation that we go with the governor's recommendation for the Kansas Guardianship.
Okay. We have a motion on the floor by Senator Petty to recommend the governor's recommendation to the full Senate Ways and Means Committee. Do we have a second? We have a second by Senator Holscher. Do we have any comments on this? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Committee members, we will now move to the budget for Commission on Veterans Affairs. Do we have any motions on this? Senator Petty.
I'll make a motion that we follow the governor's recommendation. Do you want it for both years?
Yeah, this one probably needs it for both years. So we have a motion on the floor by Senator Petty to recommend the governor's recommendation for fiscal year 21 and fiscal year 22. Do we have a second? Second by Senator Thompson. Do we have any discussion? No discussion. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Okay, committee members, we do have a few minutes that we can do a little bit of final action, but before we go to that, could you please make sure that your packet for Camille is turned in, please? Senator Thompson.
Does that include the information only for Camilla? Okay. not the other Comfort.
Committee, as she is gathering those, we will turn our attention first up to Senate Bill 83. What is the will of this committee on Senate Bill 83?
Mr. Chairman, can we have a update on 83 or review on 83?
Jenna, would you give the committee an update on Senate Bill 83, please?
Yes, sure. As you may remember from last week, Senate Bill 83 concerns the State Child Death Review Board, and it would allow this board some exceptions that the proponent went into in depth relating to the strict circumstances under which that board could release some of the confidential information that board is entitled to. Some of the more notable ones were law enforcement agencies and prosecutors like county or district attorney's offices, as well as an organization so that they would be able to put that information into the information sharing related to the national board.
Senator Holscher.
Yeah, as a follow-up, was there any consensus attained in regard to the potential amendment? I believe Mr. Klump, as well as maybe Rachel Marsh, we're going to address that.
I believe there was Senator Baumgartner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did request that our revisor prepare that amendment, and we do have that amendment based on that request. I do not have copies, but I know that our revisor, Jenna Moyer, was going to put that up on the screen.
All right, so if the committee is ready, then I will attempt to share my screen of just this information.
We are ready.
All right. Trying not to share anything confidential, so. 83. So you should be able to see that, hopefully. Make it a little bigger. All right, can everyone see that okay?
Jenna, would you mind increasing the magnification on that? I don't know if anybody else can read it, but I just see a bunch of black.
I just sent it to our committee assistant.
Okay, thank you.
And I'll also email this out. Let's see, because I can't quite see what I'm sharing. And so it's made as big as it can be on my screen. I don't really have any other. Does that help at all?
Yes, that's a lot better. Thank you, Jenna.
And so this was the one that I believe that Ed Klump had asked for.
Senator Baumgartner, would you like to explain your amendment?
The amendment simply says it adds C, if the board had knowledge of a law enforcement investigation involving the death of a child. And so that was the concern that they wanted to make sure was included.
And according to my notes, that's what I have down as well. Senator Baumgartner, is that a motion to move your amendment?
I will move my amendment, Mr. Chair.
I have a second by Senator Thompson. Any discussion on this amendment before we take to a vote? Senator Petty.
It's really not discussion. I just don't know. It hasn't ever dropped in the email. What you sent, I'm sorry. had a lot of practice with this in education, so I'm still looking. No. Did, did, ta-da. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. All right. Do we have any other discussion on this amendment before we take it to a vote? Seeing none, all those in favor of the Baumgartner amendment, say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. That amendment will be adopted to Senate Bill 83. Now we are back on Senate Bill 83 as amended. Do we have any other discussion on Senate Bill 83? Senator Thompson.
I move we report Senate Bill 83 out favorably for passage, Mr. Chairman.
As amended?
As amended, yes.
We have a motion by Senator Thompson to pass out Senate Bill 83 as amended favorably, and a second by Senator Baumgartner. Do we have any discussion on this motion and second? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. All those opposed, nay. Committee, our first bill is going to hit the floor. So we have time for one more, I believe. Senate Bill 85. Jenna, can you give us a brief update on what Senate Bill 85 does, please?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. Senate Bill 85, we had a hearing on last week, and it relates to children in foster care and the management of those contractors by the Department for Children and Families. And this would require a special notification for when a child has gone missing or spent an overnight period in a contractor's facility.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Jenna. Senator Petty, you have a question?
No, Mr. Chairman, I do have an amendment.
Okay.
And Jenna does have it. Jenna, it would be the amendment on the first page.
If you wouldn't mind, would you mind sharing which of those amendments you might want to offer first?
The first page on line 28.
Okay, great. Yep. I will pull that up. And share. So this would be that amendment, and it actually would go into two places, would replace in line 27, facility under the control of the contractor, with the language not licensed as a placement for foster youth. And then it makes that same change on page 2.
I'll speak to that if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman. I think we had testimony from Rachel March about concerning this bill, and also clarification in that section that currently says spend any overnight period in a facility under the control of the contractor. And this just clarifies that it would be in a facility not licensed as a placement for foster youth. So I think it appears to match what was brought up in the testimony.
Senator Petty, was yours just the not licensed for residential care of children amendment?
Not licensed as a placement for foster youth.
Okay. Senator Baumgartner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is it the intention that this would also include vehicles? I don't think of a vehicle as a facility, but we certainly know that our kids have spent the night, our foster kids have spent the night in vehicles.
Correct. And I don't see that a vehicle, just as a facility, would not be licensed as a placement for foster youth as well. The current language spent any overnight period in a facility. So this takes into what is currently licensed, and a vehicle would not be. But as you can see, the current language doesn't say vehicle either.
Mr. Chair.
Senator Baumgartner.
I guess I'm just asking, would the senator be willing to change the word facility to be in a location not licensed as a place meant for foster youth? A vehicle is a location, it's not a facility, but we know that our foster children have spent the night in a vehicle.
I see that as a friendly amendment.
If I may just interject, I had a very similar amendment to Senator Petty's, except mine had an addition, but the wording that mine used was not licensed for residential care of children. Would that alleviate that concern of vehicles?
I think it gets us, Mr. Chair, back to the issue of facility. And just to be clear, we want to make sure that children and the situations of children that are put under the care of the state, that there is as much transparency as possible. It was not until we had our interim meetings that we heard that kids were spending the night in vehicles. So we'd always heard that they occasionally were occurring in agency offices, but in the report, as far as the settlement for the class action lawsuit, it included that kids were spending the night in hotels as well as vehicles. So I don't want to be a nag about this, but I think since we know that vehicles have occurred, that is simply my concern about facilities. I'm sorry. Sorry, Mr. Chair.
No, good discussion, and I appreciate that. And Senator Petty.
I'm amenable to Senator Baumgartner. Say the words again.
I think we have it right now where it says spent an overnight period in a location not licensed as a placement for foster youth.
Do we have any further discussion on this amendment? Okay. Senator Gossage. Yeah, you can move that amendment as amended by Senator Baumgartner. Okay. We have a motion on the floor by Senator Gossage, and we have a second by Senator Thompson to approve the amendment as amended by Senator Baumgartner. Do we have any discussion on this amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. And the ayes have it. Okay. Jenna, how would I do my amendment that I had that was similar to that, but keeping the current amendment language in the previous sections?
Mr. Chair, you can offer your amendment, and if there's parts that you want me to take out or add to, I can certainly do that.
Okay, thank you. Send it, please. Okay, Donola is going to send that out. My amendment, we will strike out the first two balloons that say not licensed for residential care of children. So the only thing that my amendment would offer then is on page 2, it would strike lines 6 through 9, and in place it would insert this language: the Department for Children and Families shall prepare an annual report to the legislature summarizing data, outcomes, and trends related to the children reported under this section. Such report shall outline efforts made by the department to meet the needs of children reported under this section and make any recommendations to the legislature to improve outcomes for these children.
And Mr. Chair, are you offering that amendment so I can share it on my
I
screen?
am. Thank
Okay,
you, Jody.
great.
Thank you.
So you should be able to see that now. It would just be the change on page 2.
Jenna, that seems a lot less wordy than my amendment, but it starts out
wait.
with, yeah.
This might be better. Sorry about that.
Yeah, that looks like the words that
Yes.
that I see in mine.
Yes. My apologies.
Do we have any discussion on this proposed amendment? Senator Baumgartner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just curious, do you envision, should we have passage of Senate Bill 83, that perhaps that oversight committee would receive quarterly updates?
That would be correct, yes.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, I will move. Senator Petty.
Okay, so now just so I'm clear, are you changing the length? We've changed we passed an amendment to change the language on page 1 in line 27. So I'm looking at your amendment. Is your amendment now changing that language again?
No, Senator Petty, the first 2 balloons are stricken, and then the only thing in my amendment is the last balloon.
Thank you for clarifying that for me. I'm looking at the amendment.
You're
talking about the larger box about the department.
That is correct.
Yeah, it'll take me a minute to delete all of that, but it'd just be for the changes on page 2.
So did Senator Baumgartner ask to offer a friendly amendment to this amendment? No?
We can't because 83 is not passed.
Okay.
Right. It was just a clarification. If it were to pass, is that what he envisioned?
Do we have any further discussion on this amendment? Seeing none, I move my amendment. I have a second by Senator Thompson. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, nay. Okay, we are now back on the underlying bill. Do we have any further amendments or any further discussion? Senator Petty.
Well, I just mentioned that I had an amendment for the same section that you just amended. And it was based on some of the testimony from Rachel Marsh, but I think your amendment meets it, although in my amendment, I'm trying to, she had included, it was a little more detailed in that needs of youth with runaway behaviors or without access to stable placement. I guess this would be inclusive of that. That's the population that is the most difficult when we're talking about children in foster care and the ability to be able to locate stable placement for them because of their high needs. So I'll just add my thoughts there.
Thank you, Senator Petty. Do we have any other discussion, or Senator Gossage?
I move that we pass the bill favorably out of committee with the, as amended.
We have a motion on the floor by Senator Gossage to pass Senate Bill 85 as amended, a second by Senator Baumgartner. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no, nay? Okay, the ayes have it. And committee, that's our second bill, and we are out of time. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.